Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's MEF webinar. I'm Nasia Skulikariti, a MEF advisor, and I'm excited to guide you through an important and timely, discussion on IoT security and the upcoming Cyber Resilience Act, otherwise known as CRA. Joining me today are two distinguished experts in the field, Jimmy Jones, Head of Security at ZARIOT, and Dr. Cédric Levy-Bencheton, CEO of Cetome. They will be sharing valuable insights into how businesses can prepare and to navigate the challenges of the CRA, a regulation set to really reshape how we approach and see security in IoT. Over the next hour, we will look into what CRA means for the IoT landscape, the compliance requirements, and real-world impacts that businesses need to consider. Furthermore, we will be exploring actionable steps you can take to ensure your organization is ready and prepared for this new regulatory environment. Now, I encourage you all watching us today to put your questions in the questions box of the webinar, and we will make time at the end to answer as many as possible. Now, folks, thank you for joining us. And without further ado, let's get started. So, Jimmy, I will pass this baton over to you, and please introduce yourself further in our topic.
Well, thanks, Nasia, and thanks to MEF for hosting this webinar. We really appreciate that. As Nasia said, my name's Jimmy Jones. I work for ZARIOT, and I work as the head of security. Today, we're going to be focusing a lot on the EU Cyber Resilience Act and all the legislative implications that has. And we think that's hugely important, as it will affect the whole of the IoT industry. And plus, it differs from some of the other legislation in that it doesn't just look at the device, it looks at the wider service. But I'm not going to go too much into that because Cédric can talk about that and he's far more qualified than me. What I would say is legislation is only one driver for IoT security. IoT security will affect us all. And securing the connectivity part in the best possible way we can was the premise for ZARIOT, and it's the reason that ZARIOT was created in the first place. So ZARIOT as an MVNO has always been very focused on security and also in allowing innovation. That comes from our sister company. One of our sister companies sells the security solutions to major operators across the globe, and we implemented that very early, and that won us some nice GLOMO awards that you can see up there by the GSMA. But when we looked further into it, we started to see that we're an IoT connectivity provider, not a telco. Telco is just what we use to be able to deliver that. So we decided we needed to give more tangible benefits even to our customer base. And we did that by maximizing the SIM. We can create our own applets in-house and other things on the SIM. And we also maximize our position as essentially a vendor in our own network to allow the elements that we have full control of, allow those elements to be used by the enterprise. And when we tie that all in with the portal, which again is in-house, makes this a slightly different go-to-market and something where a lot of our value is found. And the reason we did that is because we believe telecoms needs to not only be an integral glue that holds IoT solutions together, but it needs to be an active and involved part as well. If you go on to the next slide for me, Cédric. And the reason for that is we think IoT needs a cohesive overall solution. You can get any device made around the world. Somebody will make that for you. You can get any application made by a developer in AWS or Google or wherever you want it. But that area in the middle, the network, has always been a little bit opaque, which is a bit weird because it's the only point that directly interacts with the others. So it should be able to give the most value because it's got that ideal position. So what we've done at ZARIOT is we've tried to take a proactive approach and look to deliver tangible benefits, like I say, by opening that up and working with the ecosystem. So just go on to the next slide for me, Cédric. And that's allowed us to provide a number of solutions. You can see quite a few there. There's a few more than that now. And we do that by using our own in-house development skills, like I said, our sister companies' development, but also an ecosystem of partners. And we've proven that we can bring innovative solutions from the IP world, like Crypto Quantique or AppSign, for instance, and we can embed them natively into the SIM to create an overall service. However, beyond our direct ecosystem, we also want to provide insight, because you have to know what's going on to be able to protect yourself. And that's the whole point for inviting Cédric today. Cetome may not be an official partner of the ZARIOT ecosystem, but it's a company that we really respect, and it's their insight and their collateral, actually. Thank you for that, Cédric. I use quite a lot to be able to illustrate what we should be looking for in the IoT market and what our customers should be doing. So I think that's enough of talking from me. So I'll give the floor to you, Cédric, and let you talk about something more really interesting.
Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Nassia, for this introduction. So we're going to be cracking IoT security, play on word on CRA, the regulation. So I'm Cédric Levy-Bencheton. I started working in IoT cybersecurity in 2014, and I created Cetome in 2017. The goal of Cetome is to support IoT manufacturers. We are an advisory. We are based, myself now, I'm based in France, but we also have a division in the UK, and we work across the world. We work on two main topics. The first topic is governance. How do we make sure people understand what to do to secure their IoT systems? And the second topic is support to developers and architects. How do we make sure they understand how to translate these high-level requirements into actionable, secure functionalities in their systems? So we have a lot of things to discuss today, and I'm going to start with a quick introduction on IoT product security and why we need the Cyber Resilience Act and what it means actually. Then we're going to look at the regulation in terms of implementing and complying with its requirements. It can be quite technical, so we're going to study that from a more implementable point of view, more actionable topics in the third part, and then we will have a quick conclusion on what you should take out from this webinar and start working on in the next few weeks and months. Before further ado, let's start to introduce the CRA. And maybe you've heard of this term, botnet. A botnet is a cyber attack which looks at compromising multiple devices to launch a lot of traffic onto a target. This will crash the target. And we've been using IoT, we've been looking at botnet in IoT since 2016. And last week, the 2nd of October, there's been an announcement that some routers that you can use in your company, that you can use at home, have been compromised to join a botnet. Last month, the FBI has dismantled an IoT botnet used by a nation state to target countries and companies in North America and Europe. And botnets can also appear because there's flaws, not only in the software, but also in the hardware. So in September again, microchips, sorry, I'm not targeting microchip in particular, but some chips can have flaws, and these flaws could be used also by attackers. So it is concerning. I am a huge buyer of IoT devices. I have about 50 devices at home. I have a smartwatch, I have smart heating, I have a smart car, I have a lot of things. And I'm also concerned that these devices are secure. So in 2016, we had this first huge botnet called Mirai, and the different governments across the world met together and decided we need to act. We need to strengthen the security of our citizens, of our people, and also of our infrastructure. So we've seen appearing a lot of regulations, and this is a panorama we've done, I think we started in 2020, and this panorama has been growing and growing. So basically, we have a lot of markets that will require IoT security in the device and in the systems. So the CRA is one of them, and it's going to be a groundbreaking regulation because it's not only looking at the device, like most of the regulations today, it's also looking at the entire ecosystem, the applications, the network. So all the DNA Jimmy has mentioned earlier. What does it mean? It's a regulation, so the text is very, very complicated to read if you don't know legal jargon and cybersecurity jargon. It's quite difficult, so we're trying to make it really easy for you to understand what it means. The Cyber Resilience Act is imposing requirements to all products with a digital element. So anything that could be connected to a network, internet network or local network, will have to implement security requirements. These requirements will target the product for its entire life cycle. For some products, it goes beyond 10 years. So the CRM mandates security for at least 10 years. We'll see what needs to be done. And the CRA is not only looking at the technical capabilities of the product. It's not looking at putting encryption in place, putting access control in place. It's also looking on how you, as a manufacturer, how you would manage the product to build a secure product, but also once the product has been made available on the market, how do you keep this product secure? Because how many of us have bought a new IoT device, super happy, and the year after, it is unsupported? So the CRA is a consumer-focused, exactly, Nasia, me too. The CRA is a consumer-focused regulation. This is based on consumer protection, and in the EU, there's this little two letters, CE, which means that your product is following the EU requirements for consumer protection, right? So this means that we need to build products with security in mind to have this CE label. Of course, the CRA is also introducing what we call security assurance. So when you want to develop a product, you will not put the same level of security in a camera, in a watch, in potentially a device that will manage a heating or a pump, industrial pump, or other devices. So there's levels of risks, and we will see how this level of risk translate onto the obligation to manufacturers. Everyone is talking about CRA. Everyone is saying it is something far away. Q4 27, we expect it to be fully implementable, and it is not so far away. There will be a lot of things to do. And there's another deadline before 27. There's a deadline about reporting issues in products, cybersecurity incidents, exploited vulnerabilities. This is quite important because by doing so, the regulator will be able to learn what is going wrong and help prevent these risks. For example, help prevent a botnet from taking over the entire railway in the UK or in Europe. Mm-hmm. Sorry, UK is not in the EU anymore. Sorry. I used to live there. I didn't mean it. So basically, what does it mean? Yes, Nasia, you have
Cédric, yes, I do. And you're mentioning here very well that the CRA mandates a mix of governance that are both technical and also non-technical. These requirements are going across the entire life cycle of the device, of the product. Now, in your opinion, which governance or technical requirement, for that matter, is the hardest for the businesses to implement across their IoT devices, and why is that?
I would say there are two. The first one would be documentation. Today, when we work with manufacturers, there's not a lot of documentation produced. The CRA requires specific documents to be produced, but also to be kept for 10 years. And some of these documents need to be made public. So for example, when there's a security issue, some manufacturers must inform their customers that this issue has happened and that it has been fixed. So it's a change of culture in many companies where you need to be more transparent. Mm-hmm. The second one is what we call the risk assessment. The risk assessment, we'll see about it later. It's a core requirement when you start a project, when you want to build a new product, you must understand the risks associated to this product, including cybersecurity risks. The CRA, again, mandates you to do a risk assessment. You have 10 years, you have to keep it for 10 years, but the CRA doesn't tell you how to do this risk assessment, which means there's a lot of clarification needed today. What is acceptable in terms of the European Commission and the European Union to do this risk assessment? Can I just do a simple risk assessment? Do I need to go further? Do I need to use a specific methodology? So today, I think risk assessment and documentation are two of the hardest governance requirements.
Interesting. And 10 years to keep that documentation, and also the ambiguity, what they have to do regarding the risk assessment. That's going to make it quite difficult to adhere to the CRA. Jimmy, what are your thoughts around that? What do you think that will be the immediate challenges that businesses will face?
I think Cedric's entirely right, but I think each business is going to have their own problems, depending on where they are. So the incident and vulnerability reporting plus the documentation, that's probably worse for a startup because they have smaller teams, they have less monitoring tools maybe. But the established companies, they might find secure by design a little bit more difficult because they're not a greenfield site. But I think really the immediate challenge is allocating sufficient resources. You've got to find the budget, you need to find the human resources to document everything, to train your staff, and then understand how that affects you before you do anything else. So with every business is complaining about limited cybersecurity expertise. And with this on top of your day-to-day activities that can't be impacted, you need to work out how you're going to resource that in more ways than one. And I think that's why sessions like this are so important. You need to educate yourself to the level of knowing there's a problem coming so you can start to plan to minimize its impact.
Very well said. And I take it there are not many experts in the field, so people have to learn and quite fast. And with that said, I guess let's figure out what is CRA, Cédric.
Yeah, thank you, Nassia. So we're going to look at the CRA in terms of IoT product security. So when we talk about IoT in this presentation, we're talking about consumer IoT at home, but we're also talking about industrial IoT that could be used in a building, that could be used by an energy provider, by a railway. These are really important and they are in scope of the CRA. This is a 338-page long document. There's 131 paragraphs of recital. The recital in the European regulation is the introduction, trying to make it simpler to understand. The 71 articles and 8 annexes in the regulation. No one is going to read everything, so we've done it for you. And as I said earlier, it will tell you what to do, what is mandatory. It doesn't tell you how. Today, when you talk to any developer, any manufacturer, they don't care about what, they care about how long it takes, how much money, how much people do I need to have. So that's really, really important to make this bridge between the text and what will be implemented in our products. So what is a secure product? There's 3 key points to remember that a secure product, first of all, will be developed in a way that when it goes onto the market, when it is released, there is no known exploitable vulnerability. What does it mean? Today, if a product is insecure, hackers can use it as a botnet. So we want to avoid hackers to discover these products and make it a botnet. The second point is to have a default secure configuration. So when your product starts, all the security functionalities needed to make it robust needs to be enabled. So for example, you can have product with a default password. Under the CRA, this is not allowed. So at the first boot, you can force the user to change the default password. This is possible. But that's just about building the product. What happens in a few months when there's new vulnerabilities, there's issues happening in the world, and the product is being hacked or cannot work as intended? So you need also, as a manufacturer, to take the steps to prevent or at least to remediate and resolve cybersecurity issues happening after the product has been sold. So build a secure product, make it work securely, and maintain it. These are 3 requirements that are specified in the Cyber Resilience Act. And we will look at this under 3 pillars. We said earlier you need to do a risk-based product development. You need to understand the risks. So the CRA mandates 3 things. You start your risk assessment, you identify what you do to mitigate these risks, and you document them. Then this identification of security measures, you have all that to do. It's a lot. It can be very technical. It can require a lot of backend infrastructure, a lot of skills, but you have no choice. It is in the CRA. And then you have legal documents to produce. The declaration of conformity saying that, yes, we have done all this. We have tested it. We can guarantee that this product is compliant with the CRA. You need also to have specific web pages to inform the customer how long you will support the product, how they can report security issues to you, and keep the documentation for 10 years. So there's a lot of things. And if you look at this approach, it's not the right approach. Doing a compliance-based approach can be really cumbersome. So what we've done, we'll see it later, we try to simplify these requirements into 5 high-level requirements. And then you can probably understand better what is expected, the how. But before that, we said that in the CRA, you need to have a risk-based approach. So the regulation is introducing product categories. A category will depend on the inherent risk of a product. So if you have a smart TV, a connected thermostat, or a smart light bulb, there's not many risks. There's some risks on your privacy. There's some risk maybe on someone modifying it, turning it on and off remotely. What happened to LG TVs a few months ago, but there are not so many risks. So it's called default category, and the European Commission estimates 90 to 95% of all the IoT products will fall into this category. And then you have 2 important products, 2 classes of important products. The first class is enhancing and increasing the security level for products that could cause important health, security, or safety issues. So smart lock, baby monitoring systems, alarm systems, connected toys, wearable system, and more. So there's everything written in Annex 3. And recently there's been a Ring camera that's been used to spy and harass people at home. So it is not acceptable. So under the CRA, these products must have a stronger set of security requirements than the default product. And if you look at the class 2 of important products, they present greater risks with greater negative impact than the first class. And basically, they are products that will use at protecting the other products, like firewalls, tamper-resistant microchips, network interfaces. They can, of course, be attacked, like the chipset we saw earlier, or another one from Qualcomm that could potentially be used to crash devices. The CRA is introducing a last class called the critical products. So this is a bridge between another regulation called NIS2. These are products that could cause significant risk of disruption to our life, to our economy. And these products are or may be used by regulated entities like hospitals, railway, energy distributors, water distributors, etc. So when we look at the list of these products, and not many, but there's one I'm sure all of you know, is the smart meter. The other one is a smart card, like your payment card. And unfortunately, sometimes this product, we call them critical because when there's a security flaw, this flaw cannot always be patched, which means it's really hard to fix the issue. So these are the 4 classes. And these 4 classes come with an important requirement regarding the implementation of security requirements, but also the testing. It's what we call assurance. We want to make sure the product is robust against these risks. There's different mechanisms in the CRA. There's a mechanism called the basic self-assessment. If you have a product in a default category, you can implement security using whichever standard on the market, like EN 303645 for consumer IoT, EN 18031, the NIST standard 62443 for industrial. So there's a lot of standards out there. and you can certify, self-assess that you have done the job properly. So this is only for the default category. As soon as you change category, you need either to use a harmonized European standard. So it's a standard published by the European Union that will tell you to be compliant with CRA, you follow this standard. And if you follow this standard, you can say you've done it, you are self-assessed. But most of the times, people have no time to wait for this harmonized standard. It can take years to publish, to agree on, and basically they will use another standard. So if they use any other standard, they have to use the route of what we call a notified body. This is a legal entity. There's a few in every country, and this notified body will verify that your security verification in-house or using a lab is conform and will give you the authorization to place your products on the market. These three mechanisms are only possible for class 1 and default products. For class 2 and critical products, you need to invest more time, more money, and more resource. You have to use a third-party assessment using an accredited conformity assessment body. So basically, there will be labs that will be approved to test devices and systems under the CRA. For critical, it's even further. You will have also European standards developed by ENISA that will be mandatory to use if they apply to your system. So for example, if you are doing a SIM card, potentially you must follow EU-CC. If you are doing a 5G system for the backend, you will have to use EU 5G. These are European certification. If this certification is also in place for a class 2 product, you have no choice. You must use this certification scheme for the class 2 product. So depending on the product you have, you will fit either in one of the first two classes, default or class 1, or you will fall in the class 2 and critical classes, making your life probably harder, but also making the assurance that this product is secure stronger.
So, Cédric, you mentioned several key steps, obviously, in securing the IoT products within the scope. How would you recommend companies prioritize these steps, especially for those facing limited resources and, of course, the expertise in the cybersecurity space?
I think what's really important is to understand what you're already doing. Maybe have a quick gap analysis against either standard or the regulation itself to understand, okay, we are already doing things. How far are we from compliance? So this would be the first step. This is something we've done a lot. It is not too long and it's not too expensive. Then the second step would be to identify your priorities based on this roadmap, based on these gaps. So potentially you will focus more on building a secure product. You will focus more maybe on testing your product. You will focus more maybe on training your team. But the first step is really important. Understand where you stand today.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very important and good to know. And Jimmy, you've been doing work in this space for quite some time. And in your opinion, or from what you've seen for that matter, are there any particular industries or sectors that will feel this impact of CRA more significantly than some others?
It all comes down to the individual business, but I think there is certain sectors that feel the impact more because of the nature of their products or the level of cybersecurity they require, exactly as Cédric's slide shows. So we do stuff with medical devices. They're already subject to loads of certification, but this is just another hoop they're going to have to jump through. The utilities and manufacturing, exactly as Cédric has highlighted, they have large legacy systems. They might prove to be a problem if they come under the CRA remit. But you can even look at telecoms. So we provide the backbone for lots of IoT devices, lots of types of IoT devices. And we need to ensure as an industry that our networks are secure. And more importantly, or as importantly, we help the devices that are connected to them be secure. So, I mean, luckily, that's pretty much ZARIOT's go-to-market I've just described. But anyway, we can't stand still. So I put us in that as well. We can't stand still because we will just get overtaken as well. But I think a lot of larger telcos, altogether, we need to look at it because it is a complex problem. And depending on your infrastructure and the tools you have to be able to secure it, then I think even for telecoms industry, it's one that needs to be looked at.
And do you think telcos in general are taking this seriously already, or we're waiting to see?
Definitely, we've seen, I mean, this is all my background here, but for years we've seen this highlighted for mobile phone issues where people can be tracked or have their SMS intercepted and stuff like that. And the major operators, a lot of them have already taken a lot of steps. Our sister company sells the solution. So if you go to Vodafone or MTN or some of those huge players, then they've made the investment, and a lot of the signaling firewalls and roaming solutions are all there. A lot of them from Celicis. But the smaller operators, then potentially they haven't. So you have a playoff there. You need to really ensure that your operator has took those steps and just ask them, have you got a signaling firewall? Have you got other protection? It's easy to answer. So I think as an industry, we're moving forward. The top end, they've already moved and they continue to develop. Specialists like ourselves, it's where we've took our niche. But ask your carrier and see what they say.
No, that's good to know. At least we're not like waiting to see like the usual MO from our industry in several of the key elements. Now, taking it back a little bit to IoT specifically, and looking at how the CRA influence cybersecurity across the entire IoT product lifecycle, from design to withdrawal. How is going to pan out? I mean, I'm opening out either to you, Jimmy, or Cédric, who wants to take that one.
I can take that one quickly. I think the first thing is going to raise awareness amongst manufacturers. It's going to go really high in the board because if they don't comply, they can't put their product on the market. They can't sell products anymore. So there are real financial incentives now to do security.
Okay.
I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think you'd hope that it's going to be positive. I mean, I've used this analogy before, but it's like the seat belts in the UK. No one these days would buy a car without a seat belt. And seat belts in the UK have had to be in every new car since 1967. But I grew up in the 70s. Nobody wore a seat belt, and there was adverts on all the TV, and they were really graphic about a lady who flies through the windscreen, lands on the road, or blood everywhere. It's terrible. But still nobody wore seat belts. And then in 1983, they decided they were going to fine you £50 if you didn't wear a seat belt. Everybody wore a seat belt. They moaned about it, but they wore the seat belts. So it sounds really familiar to the same discussions we're having about legislation in IoT today. It's just human nature, I think.
It is. And until we feel the pain, we don't take action, you know?
Yeah.
So let's try to put everything that you showed us, Cédric, in a little bit more layman's terms, perhaps, or more simplistically, in what security vulnerabilities will be most prevalent during the deployment itself, and how can a CRA address these particular vulnerabilities?
So this is something we can already see today. When you build an IoT system, there's a lot of dependencies, a lot of software dependency you bring from other suppliers. This could be open source libraries. This could be other software that you acquire. And they are containing their own vulnerabilities. And most of the IoT devices will use the same dependencies for authentication, for encryption. So when there's a vulnerability in this component, they could potentially be exploited to compromise millions of systems. So the CRA is introducing mechanism on two parts. The first part, it's a mechanism for manufacturers to learn that there is a vulnerability. So they must implement a vulnerability disclosure policy. They have a web page with a point of contact, an email or web form, where you can report security issues to them in their product. The second thing, there will be also a mechanism to inform open source developers about vulnerabilities in their products. There's also a third mechanism. I didn't mention it, forgot about it, but basically there will be a mechanism for regulators to do this job of discovering vulnerabilities and go to manufacturers and open source developers and explain to them that now they have to fix it within a certain time frame. Could be 90 days, 120 days, a bit longer. But the mechanisms are really built in the CRA to avoid this kind of issue.
Okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense. And compliance with that will avoid fines and other actions that will come to avoid the seatbelt example that you mentioned, Jimmy, earlier. So, and I guess now, I mean, how do we secure products is something that you're going to cover for us, Cedric. So let's get into that one.
Yes, indeed. So let's make sure we know how to secure products with an understanding of the CRA requirement, which can be complex and heavy. At Cetome, we try to analyze these requirements and make them simpler. When we talk to customers, they don't want to read 338 pages. They want to understand what they can do and what they can do now. So the first step is to create secure products. The second step is make sure that they can be installed securely. We already talked about it. And then they can be kept secure on the market. We extracted the step about documentation because we think this is extremely important and it requires a lot of effort. And the fifth step is do not release products with known security issues. This is a game changer in the CRA today because how many times you buy a product and there's never an update? It cannot be the most secure product in the world because people who actually invest in security will update their products. So this is quite scary and we want to change that. So how do we implement these 5 pillars? We have made this kind of checklist, high-level checklist. We're not going to go through it line by line, but you have all of these different ways for making sure you can create secure products, making sure they can be installed securely and kept secure. And then you will have the risk management and the documentation that will help you throughout all the stages. And of course, you need to get assurance with the different mechanism we saw earlier to make sure that your product will not be released with exploitable vulnerabilities. So because this is quite complex and in each box there's a lot of things to do, we have identified priorities. We think for most of IoT manufacturers, they should have a top priority in each pillar, maybe 2 in the third pillar. Do a risk assessment. Once you've done the risk assessment, implement security requirements and make sure they are activated by default. Implement secure update and learn about security vulnerability with this web page where you have a web form or an email. Document all that and make sure you have the right assurance mechanism so that everything you've done previously can be validated. Then we have second priorities in white background, and in gray background, we have things that we imagine would not be done by early starters, but could be done by more advanced companies who are not doing it today. If you are capable of doing the blue boxes today, you should be compliant with the CRA. So this is our understanding. This is our ambition when we work with our customers. We are focusing on making them compliant with the CRA, but also by raising the bar in terms of the security posture today. So have a look, take a screenshot if you need. The slides will be available. But we believe by focusing on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes, yes, 5, 6 boxes, sorry, you should have a good roadmap towards compliance before 2027. So how can we support you at Cetome? We talked about evaluating what you do. We have developed a tool called Prosecco. This is a tool that will look at your maturity in the organization and in the product, and we will compare this maturity against what is expected. We have developed this for industrial IoT and for medical, but also for consumer IoT. We also help consumer IoT products to follow well-known standards like EN 33645, and we work with another industrial standard for industrial IoT manufacturers. It's really important to follow standards because the CRA expects you to use a standard. You are not going to develop your own internal measures. This is really important. We have also developed a tool called FAST, which there's a free demo online at fast.cetome.com. This is to analyze the risks, the initial risk assessment. And we've also implemented guidelines on vulnerability disclosure policy, and we've made a report, which we published online for free, to understand what are the best practices to receive vulnerability reports. Last but not least, we talk about training. So if you have any need to be trained on EN 303645 for consumer IoT, we have an open session the 2nd and the 3rd of September, and all the info is on our website. So we are trying to have an overarching approach where we can bring our expertise and our experience to help manufacturers of the device we want to use.
Interesting. Looking at those slides alone, it makes my eyes pop out. It seems quite intense there, Cédric. And given all the stringent requirements of the CRA, what would be the first step? I mean, you mentioned people can go to your website and try out FAST. That's one way and the fastest way, given the name. But what would be the first step for a company to evaluate its readiness, and how can they leverage, like yourselves, external partners? You mentioned like all the ways that they can help you to truly bridge the gaps. Let us break it down a little bit more for the folks.
So I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, really understand what you're doing. And once you've identified the gaps, what's really important is to understand where you want to focus. And for that, you will leverage external partners. So there's a lot of people today who don't even know what they're doing. So understand what you're doing, then understand what you are not doing. And in what you are not doing, we can help you prioritize that. If you are not doing risk assessment, we think this should be the first part, really important. If you are already doing risk assessment, if you already have security measures in place, if you're already testing your devices, then we can look at formalizing this, making documentation, which is a mandatory requirement. For people who are already invested a lot of effort in the CRA, I think they should look at automating what they are doing well. There's a lot of requirements in the CRA that will require automation around incident management, incident reporting, vulnerability management. So there's a lot of discussion around the SBOM, for example. When you have a device, you want to understand what is in your device so you can manage the vulnerabilities in its software components. This is not possible by hand because you need to collect new data every day. You need to test your devices every day, so you will need to invest in automation. So I would say, depending on your posture, depending on your maturity level, you will probably tend to focus either on developing a risk assessment, training your team, or if you're a higher maturity level, probably start formalizing all that, documenting it. And if you have all that in place, maybe start automating. So we can probably see 3 different degrees of investments.
I don't know, but when I'm hearing about risk assessment, it sounds like a mountain of work that somebody will have to do, and probably that somebody might not be well prepared in this subject matter.
Yeah, that's why we created FAST, actually, because there's an issue with risk assessment. It needs to be repeatable, especially under the CRA, because you are distributing this to the test company and to the notified body. So we created this approach to make sure it's repeatable, and you don't need to be an expert to do risk assessment. So when we deploy FAST, we had people working in the marketing department who had never experienced cybersecurity, who start answering the questionnaire and ask us, so when do we start cybersecurity? So we explained that they're already doing it, because cybersecurity for an IoT product would depend on the functionality of the product. And who better than marketing or product owners know about the functionalities? So that's really a revolutionary approach. It works well. We have noticed also that customers who have been implementing FAST have decreased the number of vulnerabilities before going to a pen test. So they spend less time fixing issues after the pen test. And we've also noticed that it's being used more and more for compliance. So people can use FAST to decide what they implement, and the next step would be to justify this implementation in regards to the different methodology we presented earlier. So risk
Okay.
assessment doesn't need to be too technical. Yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. I'm sure a lot of people will feel relieved to hear that, because when we think, forget risk assessment, just cybersecurity, it's easier to put the blinders on and think like somebody else will do it rather than get cracking with it. So, Jimmy, from your experience and this everything that you guys doing at ZARIOT, what has been your your exposure and experience so far, looking at this matter, and where this whole thing around partnerships fits into the whole equation?
I think it's the whole concept of the ecosystem. I think once you've looked at yourself, and I agree with Cédric 100% on this, but you have to not only have a self-assessment or a risk assessment, you also have to look at yourself in a warts and all worst case, because you have to accept, okay, that you've got a problem before you can actually start to address it. But the whole concept of the ecosystem is to try and help IoT. IoT is too complex for one person to deliver. You need the device expertise, you need the networking expertise, you need the guy who can secure the application, write the application, put the functionality in. Nobody's got that amount of knowledge. So the point of the ecosystem was to try and fill those gaps for our customers and help them go to market a lot quicker. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to go look around, and when we come and work with a partner that we feel is really good, there's a company called 7Shift that they're moving towards becoming a conformity assessment body. Is that how you say it? So that will be really complementary to this story that Cetome are telling today. So we're looking to do that. We're also looking, one of the things that comes up all the time is lack of encryption on data. Crypto Quantique and AtSign, we can work with them with partners. We can also use IoT Safe. So all of that comes together to try and give you a set of building blocks. And if we can give the secure connectivity from our point of view and introduce you to people that we think would be an overlay to the product and are worth talking to, or open up your eyes like Cetome have on this call, we think then we're doing our job, and selfishly we're probably getting you to market quicker. So if I have to look at my accountant, I can say the reason we do this is to sell more SIMs, to make the company and our customers more successful. So commercially it makes sense, the security makes sense, and I think altogether it gives you that nice cohesive story.
That's a very good way of putting it, because in the end of the day, like you said, Jimmy very well saw that nobody can do this alone. We depend on each other. And so let's leverage each other's expertise and knowledge to get there faster, because we can't wait. 2027 is just around the corner. And what can we expect? Cédric, I think you...
Yeah, that's actually my conclusion. We should not wait for 2027. This is really important. Everything we presented today, even if you focus on the 5 top priorities we highlighted earlier, will take time. It's important to understand that the Cyber Resilience Act is a groundbreaking regulation. Today, this is the first regulation to consider not only the device, but also this entire ecosystem. So that's why, as Jimmy said, you need to work with your partners, you need to work with your suppliers, you need even maybe to work with people who are in your domain to identify what could be done, what should be done. As a manufacturer, if you are here today, I think you understood the top priority. Where do you stand? What is your top priority for next year? What are your gaps? For here, please contact us or contact any other consultancy, but I think we are well positioned to help you. And then once you know what to do, let's go to work. Let's start implementing it. Let's start verifying it. Make sure that the implementation is done from a secure point of view with the support of experts. Make sure that you have identified the appropriate methodology for assessing your device. Make sure your infrastructure is in place for updating the device. So it's really about just doing it and hoping that everyone else in the same ecosystem will do it, because we need to work all together to reach CRA compliance.
I couldn't agree more. I think also as we prepare for this deadline that's looming around the corner, and there's so many deadlines before that, as you told us earlier, Cédric, 2027 is not that far away. So just to put some context into this, what kind of emerging threats or technologies should companies keep an eye on that could be significant, that could significantly impact their compliance journey or their compliance readiness for that matter?
Well, the main one is what we call the supply chain risk. If you do security properly in your company, in your products, it's going to be much, much harder to compromise your product. So attackers are quite smart, and they will look at attacking dependencies, software dependencies, or cloud systems. And there's been a lot of recent attacks where basically they compromise big suppliers. And this is a risk because they could compromise maybe smart home devices, but they could also compromise heavy industrial IoT devices. And that's one of the emerging threats in the last few years, I would say.
Yeah, I think the supply chain one has come up a lot. We saw something in the Middle East a few weeks ago, but I think that geopolitical position affects a lot of IoT as well. Maybe not the consumer side, but some of the others, that utilities and factories and other critical infrastructure. And they need to look at sort of advanced persistent threat APTs. I think that's difficult for them because they tend to be very sophisticated attacks and also long term, and plus you're probably defending yourself against a nation state, so that's quite a big one. But after that, I think I would end up moving into the normal buzzword bingo. So AI, quantum computing, all that sort of technologies, and the impact that has that we're yet to understand is probably the biggest unknown between now and 2027.
Indeed. We do have a question from the audience that I would like to make sure we answer before we move on to any other questions, given that we're coming to the top of the hour pretty soon. And we are asked, first of all, we're thanked for the insights. And the question is, you mentioned enforcements, but what role do you think these mechanisms play in ensuring businesses don't treat CRA compliance as merely a checkbox exercise? Jimmy?
Blimey. Okay, so that's a tough question. So the enforcement mechanisms, that they're going to be critical. We've said that already. And it's not just the fines, the 2% or whatever, they're the headline grabbers that people want, but as Cédric mentioned earlier, there's lots of other options. There's the inspection of compliance that Cédric mentioned, the public disclosure of problems. There's the incident reporting, which is so hard, but which we think will be so difficult to do. So there's plenty of really big sticks to hit you with to make sure you do it. But if we look at it the other way, there's also some carrots there as well. So if you can get the certification or the accreditation and you can get the CE mark on your device, then that's really valuable because you're differentiating your whole your whole solution from what's around you. So I think putting those together, the CRA hasn't done a bad job. It's not just gone after you completely with sticks. It hasn't done a bad job, and I think that is the way to move it from a tick box exercise to something that's actually going to happen. Bit of a tough question.
Okay, all right, it makes a lot of sense. I can't help but think that with all the regulation, not just CRA, but in general, sometimes we run the risk of affecting innovation or limiting innovation in some shape or form. And this is a question that I have for both of you, really. What do you think will be the long-term impact that CRA would have on innovation and development, particularly, obviously, in the IoT space?
I can start. I really think it could help foster innovation. So today, when you are building an IoT device, you're going to spend a lot of time looking for a secure hardware, looking for a secure platform, looking for a secure device. So I think there will be potentially new companies, new startups, or existing companies that are already doing it to provide secure building blocks. And with these companies innovating in the space by being secure partners, I think ZARIOT is already one, for instance, that you provide secure components to manufacturers. This is actually fostering innovation, in my opinion. Because we need to change the way we do business. It's not about going to the cheapest anymore. It's probably going to the most balance between price and security.
That's good to hear. What about you, Jimmy?
I totally agree. I think that the only way that IoT can reach its potential is and flourish is for it to be trusted, and it can only be trusted if it's secure. So I think making security integral to the design helps build that consumer confidence and allows that to actually happen. Obviously, on the flip side, there'll be people who say that there's added complexity and that will slow speed to market and add additional cost or whatever. And then they'll say that's the reason it could stifle innovation. But let's face it, IoT is going to be in our world. We're already interacting with IoT on average every 30 seconds. So that impact of, okay, it might slow it down a little bit. I think that's a small pill to swallow if it gives us security in our everyday lives, because you can't turn off your smart house, you can't turn off your smart street or your smart car or your smart office. So we need to start thinking about this. It has to be secure, or where do we go?
Very much so. And as I always say, that it's not a question of when anymore or if, it's already happening. Everything will be connected. So last question before the end of our session, and that's around how do we think or see CRA evolving over time? I mean, we're talking, I mean, we still haven't started and to think how it could evolve, but it's good to be somewhat prepared.
I'll take the first pop of that. I think, like all legislation, you've got to think it's going to increase in scope, because everybody likes to increase their scope. So over time, it's going to get probably bigger. So that's a good enough reason to start preparing for it already. I also think, as Cédric said, I think it's going to have an impact in other regions. So I think its influence will spread. So I think it's a blueprint for other people to follow. So I suppose it sort of pushes you to say that you need to invest in security now, start speaking with experts like Cetome, because or actually staying close to the regulatory bodies and seeing what they're going to do, because that's the only way you can really build a strategy and understand how CRA even will evolve over time.
Yeah, from my side, I think the evolution is something we already expect the regulator to produce. We expect them to clarify what it means. We expect them to help small and medium companies implement the requirements without starting from scratch. So basically, they are starting projects already. Because it's a European regulation, they will probably have an impact assessment after several years of implementation. So fingers crossed, if there's any flaws that we've not seen today, these will be fixed. They've done it already in other regulations. I really believe the next step would actually be global harmonization. So today the CRA is only targeting the EU. What about the UK? They're very close to us, but they are not the EU anymore. What about North America? They have their own set of regulation, which are not mandatory. What about countries today with no regulation, or geographies, entire geographies with no regulation? We cannot expect insecure device to disappear. If this country exists, they will probably migrate there, which doesn't make us more secure. So probably I think there should be an evolution in a positive way of the CRA towards something more global, I would say.
And I think that's a very good point to end this session and this webinar, global harmonization. It sounds beautiful to listen to, but very difficult to achieve. So folks, thank you so much for joining us today. Jimmy, Cédric, thank you so much for the immense information and insights that you brought forward on what we need to do and how to approach CRA. From all of us at MEF and myself, thank you for joining. Until next time, stay connected.